Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here today. Today is the 6th of March, 2024, a Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in. You know, we're all used to our houses that are built with normal construction measures. Me too. Have central air and heat and so on. It's nice and everything. But it's not what's absolutely required for your survival. Now, an awful lot of people that are trapped in the cities, if there is heaven forbid, some sort of a maybe EMP attack or nuclear strike or gosh knows what it is. This is why they're preparing these Bugout bags. You know, an awful lot of people are preparing Bugout bags that live in the cities or in an urban setting because they realize that under the right kind of conditions, if society loses its boundaries, society disintegrates into the point where it's like a lot of factors could cause this. Civil war could cause it. War in general, World War III could cause it. Nuclear strikes, like I say, a lot of things could cause this to happen. And once the power goes out, and I mean it ain't coming back on because something really big's happened, maybe an EMP, so civilization will decay into unstructured craziness. And so if you're caught in a city or in an urban setting, you know, even the best, even if you're a Rambo, it doesn't matter. If you're in the wrong setting, it'd be very hard, you know, and you don't need the big luxury house. You don't need all the central heat and air. You don't need to have in order to survive. And so they're packing things in their Bugout bags. And a lot of people are packing Bugout bags. And they have this idea that they're going to survive the nuclear apocalypse by heading out of the city. And maybe on foot will be the only way out. Because if you're in a big city, the highways might get blocked and the vehicles, especially if it's an EMP, the vehicles end up just blocking the roads. Because once the computer module inside them is fried, they ain't going nowhere. So they're going to be on foot too. Well, you're prepared for that. You got your Bugout bag, but what do you got in your Bugout bag? This is what I'm getting at. Maybe you got a few essential things. Maybe you got dried food. Well, good for you, you know. Maybe you got a water straw or something like that. Maybe you got a few of these little tarps that are they call them a solar blanket or whatever. You know, they're a reflective tarpaulin, small tarpaulin. Maybe you got a couple of those and a medical kit and essentials, you know. But I want to point something else out to you. That's not good for long-term survival. Just having a solar blanket. You know? It's not like having an actual house. It wouldn't take an awful lot of extra weight in your Bugout bag to pack one of those military shovels, folding shovels or something that's also it's also like a little pickaxe at the same time, you know, that you can dig with. A hammer, a roll of wire, an axe, a small hatchet or an axe or a small axe, the saw blades that come with a bow saw. They're only thin and they're very light. You could carry about 4 or 5 of those. If you just didn't have the whole bow saw, you just had the blade that goes for the bow saws. And with a few minor tools like that, some spikes, big handful of spikes, and a couple heavy-duty tarpaulins. Now, all that would weigh a little bit, probably weigh 20 pounds, you know, extra in your bag. But if you can carry it, it would enable you to build what you see in the picture here. And this can be built with ingredients that you find in the forest. Basically how it's done is you find a side hill, just like you see here. Maybe not quite that steep, or maybe a little bit steeper even. You dig a little bit into the side hill, and you make a level spot. And another tool you could carry with you, it's only tiny, the size of a pen, is what's called a line level, and some string. And I'm going to tell you guys, all the materials to build this thing, except for the tarpaulin for the roof, you can find in the woods. And because it's small, it doesn't take very long to build it. If you wanted to work all day at it, you could probably build it in 3 days. If you've got any amount of skills for... it doesn't take an awful lot of construction skills either. Just basically, just basic simple tools. You don't have to get it perfect, but it just has to be strong enough to... And you basically, you take those saw blades that I told you about, and you use them to cut nice, straight, smallish timbers. And it can be built in just a couple days, a few days, you know. And it's dug into the hill, so it uses the hill as a backdrop and also as insulation, because that earth comes up halfway around the... And it lasts about 6 years, 7 years, or more. Sometimes it even lasts 10 years before it rots out. So it's a permanent shelter. And how the heat's supplied to this is, on the back side of the hill, you dig in and you take stones that you find. You go around hunting for stones, and you go around hunting for mud. And what you do is you lay the stones just like you lay brick. You know how brick are laid with mortar, but you use mud for mortar. And when you get this thing built up to the right size, you build on a rip-roaring fire inside it. And of course, mud and rocks do not burn, but they heat up. And when they heat up, that mud gets hard, because it's just like the way they used to fire brick. You know, that's how bricks were made. Clay is basically mud, you know. And you hunt for the kind of... If you're in an area where there's a lot of sand, you hunt around in the woods, and you can generally, most typically, you can find some mud. Maybe you'll have to go down to the edge of the stream or someplace like that, and you can find mud. And mud's one of your tools that you use for... Basically, you use it like you use cement to build this thing. And stone. And generally, you can always find stones. And, of course, the trees. And then when you're done, you lay the tarpaulin over the whole thing, and then you hold the tarpaulin down by throwing either earth or moss. Moss is great to throw on top of the tarpaulin, and also sticks and stuff to keep the wind from blowing it off, and all that weight on top of the tarpaulin. So there's a good... What you notice about this is there's a good lean to the roof, so the water doesn't sit there. The water hits whatever it is, moss or mud or whatever's on the roof, and it comes down to the point where it hits the top of the tarpaulin, and then it runs down and off. And so it's perfectly dry inside. So you got fire inside there in your hearth that you built out of rocks and mud for heat, and you got internal heating. You got and you've got dry. And what else more do you actually need other than food? Once you get this thing built after 3 or 4 days, and even a person that's maybe, I don't know, maybe you're slow, it might take you a week, but still, this is the kind of thing you would need if we have a nuclear war, or if we have a SHTF or something like that, you know, in a remote location. Get as far away from the city, out in the woods. And what you want to look for, you're walking through the woods, right? You're looking for a place to build this thing. You look for a gentle slope, but you also look for maybe a stream at the base of the gentle slope. So you got a water source there. So you can use your emergency straw or whatever, you know, to draw water and draw food. Now I wanted to get into the news today. What's happening? The EU is warning of winter energy prices as Russia and Ukraine gas deal ends. And so they're going to hike the energy price up so high that Europeans, it's going to be even worse when they're trying to afford to heat their homes. And winter is going to be coming around again, a few months away, you know. Now, Europe is working on their war machine as fast as they can right now. They're going to their plan is to wean themselves off of the United States weapons. European Commission presented a far-reaching defense industrial strategy, Euro 1.5 billion subsidy program, and the European Union is no longer just a peace project. European Commission presented a European defense industrial strategy along with subsidy, a cash pot of at least Euro 1.5 billion, called the European Defense Investment Program. Well, what they're doing is they're matching the Russians, basically. The Russians are out there and they're weaponizing as fast as they can. So we've got both sides readying themselves. So they're not just beating the war drums, they're readying themselves for this conflict. Now, during these conflicts out there, food supplies tend to get cut off. War is a tremendous thing that leads to famine. War leads to famine. And already we've got the war in Ukraine. Ukraine's a major grain producer. So millions now, Sudanese, I believe those are the people of Sudan, are going hungry as war disrupts their food supplies. Cairo, a mother who skips meals so there's not enough food for her and her 2 children. A 60-year-old man who eats 1 meal a day, a lump of dough made from flour and water. People are venturing from their homes and desperate searching for food. And also at the same time, they're at risk of being hit by artillery shells. So the world's being a very hard place right now, guys. You know, that's because war is the worst of the worst, you know, and what we're looking at is it's on so many different fronts now. I got so much to report on this, you know. Houthis are carrying out qualitative military operations against 2 U.S. warships in the Red Sea. The Yemen Houthis are at it again. They targeted 2 U.S. warship destroyers in the Red Sea. Now, what they're saying about this operation is they're saying that it's qualitative. So, the Houthis are stepping up their attacks. They're going big time here. It seems like the more you bomb them, the worse effect it has. And of course, that costs a lot of money as well. Now, here's the thing, guys. For years now, I mean, when I was a young guy, they used to always have spring break down in Miami and spring break in Daytona, and I used to live near Daytona Beach, and there was just loaded people, you know, spring breakers. They always act like they always act, you know, but Miami Beach is going to charge them $100 to park. It says because they wrecked the city. Well, I don't believe for a minute that all of them are bad and all of them make this havoc. It's just a few. It's always a few party goers amongst the others who make things rough for everybody else. Oh, it looks like the thing took a little break there for a second. My computer stopped. But anyway, what I was saying is spring breakers are going to charge them $100 to park. It says because they wrecked the city. Well, you know, there always used to be a little bit of rowdiness when I was a young guy. I remember back when I was 20 years old, they were having spring break there, and there's always a few rowdies in the crowd. I don't think it's right to charge everybody just for a few rowdies. And also, another thing about this is the fact that they've been using Florida for spring break forever, practically. You know? I don't totally agree with they wrecked the city either. I mean, isn't that being a little bit exaggerating a little bit? They're just young people. They just looking to have a little bit of a good time. Maybe crack down on the rowdy ones. But they're gonna charge everybody $100 to park. Well, nowadays $100 isn't nothing. Well, sounds like a lot, but it used to be a lot. But now $100, you can't even buy a hamburger practically. The Philippines say it won't let China remove a Filipino military outpost on a disputed shoal. Now, this is a big story. I'll tell you guys why this is a big story. This is a very heated area in around the South China Sea. It's one of your hot spots in the world. And it also is inclusive with what's going on in Taiwan. Then, in other words, everything's ready to blow over there in around the South China Sea, and it could blow up into a war. It wouldn't take much because the conditions are right. And so you get this going on with the Philippines saying it won't let China remove a Filipino military outpost. So that's why I'm taking note of this, because it's a locking of horns between China and the Philippines. It says the Philippines will not allow China to remove a Philippine military outpost in a fierce dispute in the South China Sea on a shoal. A Navy official said Wednesday, after 4 Filipino Navy personnel were injured in a confrontation between the Chinese and Philippine ships. We got to keep our eye on this situation. It's a little bit worse and more intense than you would imagine because of the area it's in and what's going on between China and Taiwan and China and the South China Sea and the dispute over the South China Sea. And this is very tense. Now, Nikki Haley, she's dropped out of her presidential bid, I guess, setting up a Trump-Biden rematch. So it's going to be, it looks like, it really is starting at this point. If I had to lay money on it, guys, I would say at this point it's going to be Trump against Biden. That's the way it looks like it's setting up. Quite seriously. Now, what about buying a house in the United States right now? It's soared by 80%. What you're going to have to pay for a mortgage in the United States of America for a home has soared by 80% just since 2020. So in 4 years, it's surged by 80% what your mortgage payments would be. So it says right here that it said the average mortgage, it said it down here. It says it showed that the monthly mortgage payment on a typical home has nearly doubled since January 2020. It's went to $2,188, and that's assuming you put 10% down. So used to be you get away with $1,000 for a mortgage. Oh heck, just a few years ago it was only like $500 for a mortgage to pay off your mortgage every month. Just a few years ago. It wasn't that long ago either. And then before the crisis here, before the COVID, it was probably about $1,000 or something like that. Now it's $2,188. You're going to come up with that kind of money every month. It's really tough. And that's with a 10% down payment. Silver today. Silver is $23.96 today. So it's almost $24. We're at that $24 barrier I've been telling you guys about, where they've been let it go up to about $24 and then they knock it back down to $21.50. They've been done that for the last 3 times or something. So we're wait and see on this because we're up near that top edge. If it can break out and get away from that trend mark and start to move up to the high side, That's what we're watching for. Well, they're 24.12. So it's right on it. It's right on it right now. You know? Taking a look at precious metals, gold is at 21.39, and it's up 12. It's up 12% today. It's up $12 today, and it's up 0.57%. And crypto's been doing good. Crypto took a little fall off. I tell you, it's that psychological barrier, $68,000. It went up and touched around there. And I told you guys it's a psychological barrier. And then it dropped back. I was kind of expecting it to drop back, but it's bouncing back just that quick. It's back up to 66,609. And Ethereum is at 3802. And we're looking at XRP at 59.8 cents. The Dow Jones today. The Dow Jones is up 201 points at 38,786. We're seeing the Dow Jones staying at that high peak right now. Crude oil. Should have had that oil chart on there already. Let's take a look here. It's up. Wow, that's a big jump for crude. $2.31 to the upside at 80.46. Now, I heard that Saudi Arabia, in order to meet their budgets and everything else, they got to get crude up to $90. And so this is important. So in order to, I guess, balance their budget or something like that, something to that effect, you know, they need a higher crude price. Of course, America is a major crude producer. So if crude prices go up, say they go up to $90, and that means it's going to be more of a profit margin for our American crude producers. Now, looking at the U.S. 10-year today, it's dropped 2.3 basis points at 4.11, and the U.S. 30-year has dropped 1.2 basis points, and it stands at 4.26. And the U.S. dollar index is at 103.47 today, and it's down a little bit. Well, I'll tell you, this thing's going to collapse. You know what? I'm expecting the U.S., even compared against these other crappy currencies, is probably going to go down to 70. And that's being compared. What it's being compared against, the euro, mostly. Let's compare it against something that has some real value, like gold. It really, honestly, guys, this U.S. dollar index, it should be the dollar against gold. Maybe I'll do a little show where I talk about a little bit more on my Patreon channel about these bushcraft buildings and what materials, all the materials. Listen, well, what do you think the settlers did? They came over to this country, and they're basically from Europe and stuff, and they didn't have a pot to, they didn't even have a night pot. I was going to say a pot to something in, the old saying, but they didn't even have a night pot, and all they had was maybe simple hand tools like an axe or whatever. And they had to build their house out of the material. There wasn't no Home Depot. Sorry. They had to build their house whatever there. An awful lot of them went out into the what used to be like the prairies and stuff, and they had sod there, and so they built a house out of sod. They used to call them soddy, you know. And some of them went out into the woods and they built themselves a log cabin, of logs from the woods. And rocks were often used. What they'd do is they'd always go out and scavenge whatever they could for rocks out of the streams and rivers around and lay them for their foundation. But that takes quite a while. To build a full-size log house takes quite a little while. It's a lot of work. It would take months. You know, but it's big. You know, a log house is a good-sized house. These little bushcraft houses are not very big. I mean, they're only like maybe 6 feet by 8 feet size. So long enough to sleep one way, 6 feet. and the other direction, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, with a little hearth, little stone hearth. I mean, it's not ideal accommodations, but it's accommodations. And you got to understand, if there's a nuclear war, well, there's going to be a lapse period there where there is no governments or anything. There's going to be no emergency services. There might not even be nothing. It might be like Mad Max. That kind of a world, it's like you're right back to basics again. You're like a stone cave person. And if you're in the city, it's just going to be mayhem there. I mean, your chances of survival in the city and something like that is only going to be if you're able to hook up with some sort of a gang or something like that that's secured a warehouse or something full of food or something. But they're all going to take it for themselves. And they're not going to give to anybody else because they realize they're not going to get any more. So say some gang, say there's a nuclear Armageddon and some gang takes over a city, and they go in, they take over a whole warehouse full of food, maybe a warehouse that was supplying the stores, but that'll run out after a while. Might take a long time. Depends on how many of them are eating from it. It might take 6 months. It might take a year. But you got to understand that they will be total savages. The survivors that live in the cities, and if this kind of an event were to happen, a grid down situation that would last for more than 4 months, the survivors in a city would be very, very tough people. Let's just put it that way. With no mercy to them whatsoever. Anyway, so you're probably better off being on your own, or your small group, whatever it is, quite a ways out from the city. Then there's going to be, in a situation like this, there's going to be these other people who are survivalists and stuff, who maybe have a small piece of land and something like that. And they're going to be all up for protecting what they have. You're not going to want to get near them either. If you come out of the city to try to escape, you're not going to want to get near them either, because they're going to be rough too. I mean, they're not going to. If you do have to approach them, if you're a city dweller, they're going to be preserving their own selves, and they're probably going to be frightened of interlopers coming in on their situation. So it could turn into a very dangerous world, but this would give you shelter, or provide you shelter, and an alternative that you could put up to just trying to stay inside, maybe some under a tarp or something like that. Because one thing, you're not safe from the animals. Maybe there's bears in the woods, and you're under a tarpaulin there. Where's your food going to be? Under the tarpaulin with you? Well, you have the bear under the tarpaulin with you as well, maybe at nighttime. And that ain't a good situation, there's something I didn't touch on. If you get in this kind of a situation, you don't want to take, maybe you trap a rabbit or something, and you're going to cook it in something. You don't want to cook it inside your bushcraft dwelling. There's a bear, you try to get in with you, So you want to just sleep in there to stay dry. You want to do your cooking someplace else, maybe on an open fire not far away, maybe 50 yards away or something, do your cooking. And have that part as your cooking part of your camp, you know what I mean? So the bears aren't going to try to get into your. Don't take the food in your sleeping place with you. Little stuff like that people don't know that live in the city, and they've never been out in the country in their life. They've never swung an axe before, There's other things that can be a problem, like, it shows a picture of this guy building his whatever here. Well, thank you guys. I'm rattling on. Thank you guys for listening to my show. You guys are the best. I really appreciate you guys out there watching my show. You guys have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.